Have you looked at your utility bill lately? Or maybe you caught that absolutely a heart-stopping moment on the news when crude oil spiked to nearly $120 a barrel.
$119.48, to be exact.
Right, exactly. And if you happen to be listening to this over in Europe, it was even wilder. Electricity prices hit a staggering 450 euros per megawatt hour in the middle of the night.
Which is just unprecedented.
It really is. So if you're sitting there wondering why your wallet suddenly feels so light or why filling up your gas tank requires taking out a small loan, you are exactly where you need to be. Today we are tearing into a massive stack of sources to figure out how we got here.
Yeah, we're pulling from a huge variety of material.
We've got intense political commentary from YouTube, official White House press conference transcripts, and some incredibly detailed reporting from The Guardian. Our mission for this deep dive is to cut through all that noise and synthesize exactly how the U.S.-Israel war with Iran went from a regional conflict into this massive economic shockwave that's directly hitting your cost of living.
Before we really get into it, though, we do need to set a quick ground rule for today.
Good call.
The material we're looking at is intensely political. I mean, we're looking at commentaries spanning from left-wing pundits who are heavily criticizing both Democratic and Republican leadership, all the way to official statements from right-wing figures like Donald Trump and Lindsey Graham.
Right.
Because of that, I need to make something crystal clear. We are not taking any political sides today. We are not endorsing any of these viewpoints, left-wing, right-wing, or anywhere in between.
Definitely not.
Our sole job here is to impartially report on the factual content and the ideas contained within all this original source material. We just want to lay out the facts so you can understand the broader situation yourself.
Perfectly said. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the geography of panic. If you really want to understand why oil prices are absolutely losing their minds right now, you have to look at a map and find the Strait of Hormuz.
The ultimate global bottleneck.
Exactly. Think of this waterway like, well, it's only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point.
Which is tiny when you think about it.
Yeah, 21 miles might sound like a decent distance. I mean, it's roughly a marathon, but when you're navigating massive, cumbersome supertankers, it is a total tightrope.
Okay, absolutely.
And a fifth of the entire world's crude oil, which is over 20 million barrels every single day, has to squeeze through this tiny passage. It is, without exaggeration, the jugular vein of the global energy system.
And right now, that jugular is practically paralyzed. When you dig into the mechanics of what's happening on the water, the threat isn't just coming from drones or missiles raining down from above.
Yeah.
Iran has actually begun laying naval mines.
Which changes everything.
It does, and we need to pause on this
Yeah.
because it's a crucial distinction. You know, a missile is targeted, it has a specific destination and a flight path. Sea mines are entirely indiscriminate.
Right, they don't care who they hit.
Exactly. They are essentially submerged explosive traps just waiting for a hull to scrape against them. They are highly destructive and notoriously difficult to clear out. And what's truly shocking here is a detail regarding the U.S. naval presence.
Oh, this part is wild.
The United States recently decommissioned 4 minesweepers from that exact region.
Wait, they decommissioned the exact ships designed to clear the mines right before this happened?
Yep. So now, this vital 21-mile passage is effectively an active minefield with severely limited sweepers available to actually clear a path.
Unbelievable.
So the U.S. government stepped in to try and calm the markets, essentially telling the shipping companies, look, we'll offer you political risk insurance, and we'll even provide naval escorts.
Basically saying, if your ship gets blown up, we'll write you a check.
Right. But the shipping companies are flatly refusing to cross. As one shipping CEO bluntly put it in the reporting, a check doesn't bring back a crew.
Yeah.
If there are active mines in the water, the ships aren't moving, period.
And that refusal just sparked absolute, unadulterated panic across the globe. It forced the International Energy Agency, the IEA, to order the largest emergency release of oil in its entire history.
400 million barrels.
400 million barrels of stockpiled oil just dumped onto the open market to try and cool things down. To really put that number into perspective for you, think back to when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022.
Right, that was a huge deal.
It caused massive global panic. Well, back then, they released 182 million barrels. This is more than double that. They are throwing everything they have at this crisis to stop the price of crude from going completely apocalyptic.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this historic release is really just a massive Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
How so?
Well, Those 400 million barrels sound like an ocean of oil, but when you look at global consumption, they only equal about 26 days of typical transit through the Strait of Hormuz.
Wow. So they emptied the vault just to buy less than a month of time.
Less than a month, and the clock is ticking loudly. Qatar's energy minister has already issued a stark warning that Gulf producers might have to shut down their production entirely within a matter of
Just
weeks.
because they can't move it.
Exactly, it's simple logistics.
Yeah.
The local storage facilities are maxing out. If they can't physically put the oil on ships and send it out through the strait, they literally have nowhere to put it. They have to stop pumping it out of the ground.
Which is terrifying for the market.
It forces you to question whether this multilateral action can actually hold off the nightmare scenario of oil hitting $150 a barrel.
And while the globe is sweating over these billion-dollar oil industries and massive logistical bottlenecks, the economics of the actual fighting on the ground are just wildly disproportionate.
The math is staggering.
It really is. Let's look at the sheer cost of this asymmetric warfare. An Iranian Shahed drone, which is basically a kamikaze drone powered by what amounts to a lawnmower engine, costs somewhere in the ballpark of $20,000 to $50,000 to produce.
Pennies in military terms.
Right. And on the flip side, a single U.S. or Israeli interceptor, like the highly advanced missiles used in the Patriot or Iron Dome systems, costs upwards of $100,000 to $150,000.
What's fascinating here is how clearly those numbers reveal Iran's overarching strategy. They aren't trying to win a conventional military war.
Right, they aren't going tank for tank.
No, they are waging a war of economic attrition. Think about the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE. Their economies rely on massive, delicate, and incredibly expensive oil fields and refineries.
Very fragile infrastructure.
Exactly. By targeting that exposed infrastructure, Iran doesn't need to overpower the U.S. military in a pitched battle. They can threaten the entire global economy with just a handful of cheap, successful drone strikes.
Wait, hold on though. If our interceptors are so incredibly advanced, with state-of-the-art radar and tracking, why does the math still favor Iran here? Are you saying a 20-grand drone can reliably beat a 100-grand defense system?
It doesn't have to beat it every time. That is the brutal reality of asymmetric warfare. If Iran launches a swarm of 20 cheap drones and the defense systems shoot down 19 of them.
Then the defenders have spent millions of dollars on interceptors.
Right. But that one single drone that gets through, that $50,000 piece of equipment, can hit a critical refinery node and take 1 million barrels of oil offline in an afternoon. The defender has to be perfect 100% of the time. The attacker only has to get lucky once.
That makes sense. Which brings us to a really eerie detail about who is actually sitting in a room running this strategy right now, because nobody really knows.
It's a huge mystery.
In the very first minute of this conflict, Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed. The regime quickly appointed his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, as the new supreme leader. But here's the thing. Nobody has seen him in public since he got the job.
He has completely vanished.
Yeah, the sources confirmed that he was severely injured. He suffered a broken leg and extensive facial injuries in the exact same strikes that killed his family.
The implication of having an absent, critically injured leader during a major war is profound. It tells us that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is currently functioning entirely on autopilot.
Like a machine.
Yes, they clearly designed a decentralized, highly resilient network specifically for this exact doomsday scenario. The fact that they can continue to launch these coordinated drone swarms, lay naval mines, and actively update their target list without a visible leader at the helm proves something terrifying.
That decapitating the leadership didn't stop the war.
Exactly. It just proved how robust and automated their command structure really is.
But that automated machinery of war has an absolutely horrific human cost on the ground. There is a somber, devastating detail in the sources regarding a strike on the Shajara Tayyibeh Elementary School in the Iranian town of Minab.
That was incredibly tough to read about.
At least 175 people were killed in that single blast, and the overwhelming majority of them were children. It is an absolute heartbreaking tragedy.
It really is a profound tragedy. And almost immediately, it sparked a fierce battle over the narrative of who was actually responsible.
The blame game started instantly.
Right. President Trump publicly claimed that Iran had accidentally bombed its own school with a Tomahawk missile, essentially citing a supposed lack of accuracy in their own targeting. However, when you look at the preliminary U.S. military investigation detailed in the reporting, the facts point in the exact opposite direction.
Right. The inquiry concluded that it was, in fact, a U.S. Tomahawk missile. The tragedy wasn't friendly fire from Iran. It was the result of a catastrophic targeting mistake by U.S. military planners.
Using bad intelligence.
Yeah, they reportedly used obsolete data from the Defense Intelligence Agency. The planners were trying to hit an adjacent IRGC base, but the intelligence failed to recognize that the school had been completely walled off from that military complex for at least 9 years.
9 years. It's a stark reminder of the fog of war and how outdated intelligence can lead to devastating civilian casualties.
It's horrific, and that chaos on the ground is creating a massive political vacuum, and Washington is already busy trying to script what happens next.
They're looking for a replacement regime.
Right. With the current regime taking heavy hits, Iranian exiles are suddenly jockeying for power, essentially pitching themselves to get U.S. backing to take over to the country.
And if you look at who is actually vying for power right now, it comes down to two main factions seeking that American blessing. First, you have Maryam Rajavi, the leader of a group called the MEA.
They have a lot of influence in D.C., right?
They have incredibly deep, well-funded lobbying ties in Washington. But they are highly controversial. For decades, the U.S. State Department actually designated them as a foreign terrorist organization. They have a very complex, often described as cult-like history.
And who is the other option?
On the other hand, you have Reza Pahlavi. He is the son of the last Shah of Iran, who was famously overthrown in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Now, he certainly has the name recognition and the royal pedigree, having lived in exile in the U.S. for decades.
But he doesn't have a presence in Iran.
Exactly. He fundamentally lacks any ground game or organizational structure inside the heavily policed state of Iran.
So you have one group with a history of terrorism designations in deep D.C. pockets, and another guy who hasn't lived in the country in almost 50 years.
Precisely. And what's crucial to understand here is that intelligence analysts warn both of these figures are highly unpopular among actual everyday citizens living inside Iran today.
So backing them is a huge risk.
Trying to install either of them via a U.S.-backed regime change would be a massive, highly unpredictable gamble that could easily backfire.
Speaking of unpredictable gambles, the political whiplash happening back in Washington right now is almost surreal to watch. In recent press conferences, President Trump has proudly announced the success of what he calls Operation Midnight Hammer, which allegedly wiped out Iran's nuclear sites, and Operation Epic Fury.
He's been very vocal about it.
He has repeatedly claimed the war is very complete and that Iran's missile capacity has been 90% destroyed.
And yet, despite those very confident declarations of a complete war, the economic reality and those paralyzed shipping lanes we talked about tell a completely different story.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because while the political rhetoric says one thing, the markets are doing something entirely different. And it is opening the door to some wild, alleged market manipulation happening right out in the open.
The timeline on this is crazy.
Imagine you're sitting at a trading desk, watching the oil tickers. Recently, the U.S. Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, posted on social media that the U.S. Navy was successfully escorting oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
And the market reacted instantly.
The price of crude oil plummeted from $85 down to $78 a barrel in a flash.
But then came the rug pull.
Yeah.
That tweet was swiftly deleted. And shortly after, the White House confirmed that no, the U.S. Navy had not escorted any tankers through the strait. The threat of the mines was still entirely real.
So the price bounced right back.
Exactly. Now, this raises an important question. Why does a deleted tweet matter so much? Because when you create wild, artificially induced price swings like that, especially originating from a high-ranking government official, it opens the door for massive sums of money to be made.
You mean through shorting the market, right?
Exactly. For those listening who might not trade commodities, shorting is basically betting that an asset's price will fall. Insiders who know the truth, who know that the Navy isn't actually escorting those ships, can short the market the second that false tweet pumps the optimism up.
And they cash in on the drop.
They can make millions of dollars in a matter of minutes before the official correction happens and the price stabilizes. The fragility of this market means a single social media post can erase or create billions in value instantly.
It's absolutely wild, and it's not just the executive branch making waves either. The sources highlight how deeply entrenched prominent figures on both sides of the aisle are in making sure this conflict continues.
The bipartisan complicity is really striking here.
Yeah, you have Republican Senator Lindsey Graham openly admitting in an interview that he traveled to Israel multiple times, specifically to be coached by Israeli intelligence, the Mossad, on exactly how to lobby the president for military action.
And across the aisle, the dynamic is surprisingly similar. Democratic leaders like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have actively supported the war effort.
They haven't pushed back at all.
No, more importantly, they have pointedly refused to commit to blocking any Pentagon funding for the conflict. The analysis of these moves suggests a deep, bipartisan alignment in Washington with Israeli military interests, prioritizing the continuation of the campaign over any domestic pushback.
Okay, so we've talked about the oil bottlenecks, we've talked about the asymmetric military tactics and the political theater in D.C., but we need to shift focus to a detail that genuinely feels like something straight out of a dystopian sci-fi novel.
The water situation.
Yes, we need to talk about water. Specifically, we need to look at the true Achilles heel of the entire Middle East desalination plants. The stats on this are just mind-blowing. Think about how much water you use in a day. Showering, cooking, drinking. Now imagine living in Kuwait, where 90% of all their drinking water comes from taking salt out of the ocean.
90%.
Oman gets 86% of its water this way. Saudi Arabia gets 70%.
And this vulnerability isn't exactly a new discovery either. Going all the way back to 1983, the CIA issued a stark, highly classified warning that desalination plants were the true, critical weak point of the Gulf states.
And now it's happening.
Now, over 40 years later, that exact nightmare scenario is unfolding in real time. We're seeing confirmation that an Iranian drone successfully struck a desalination plant in Bahrain. And in retaliation, the U.S. allegedly hit a freshwater desalination plant on the Iranian island of Keshem.
It's not just that people lose their drinking water, though. I mean, obviously, that is terrifying enough. If a drone hits that plant, it's not like the power going out where you just light a candle and wait it out. Within days, millions of people physically have no water to drink in a desert climate.
Exactly. The human toll would be immediate and catastrophic. But beyond that, these plants are incredibly delicate, highly industrialized facilities. They operate using massive-scale reverse osmosis and thermal desalination.
Which means lots of chemicals.
A tremendous amount of hazardous materials. Destroying them doesn't just cut off the potable water supply. It risks unleashing massive chemical spills directly into the Persian Gulf. We're talking about thousands of gallons of substances like sulfuric acid and ferric chloride, which are used heavily in the purification process.
So you're dumping highly toxic corrosive acids straight into the same water you rely on for future desalination.
Precisely. And when you combine that chemical threat with the constant danger to the region's oil infrastructure, you have a recipe for an unparalleled ecological disaster.
It's a ticking time bomb.
Think back to those indiscriminate naval mines we discussed earlier. If just one of those Iranian mines hits a fully loaded supertanker navigating that narrow strait, we are looking at an environmental catastrophe on the scale of the BP oil spill.
But with a major catch.
Right, this would be happening right in the middle of an active war zone, making any kind of coordinated international cleanup effort practically impossible.
So what does this all mean? Why does all this matter to you, listening to this right now, thousands of miles away from the Persian Gulf? It means the very definition of global security is fundamentally changing.
It affects everyone.
Whether you are budgeting for your weekly groceries, paying your winter heating bill, or watching your retirement portfolio bounce up and down with the stock market, your daily life is directly tethered to this conflict. The ripple effects of cheap drones, rudimentary naval mines, and deleted social media posts from Washington politicians are entirely reshaping the global cost of living.
The distance between the Strait of Hormuz and your personal bank account has never been shorter.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a final critical thought I want to leave you with today. We spent almost this entire deep dive treating crude oil as the most precious, explosive, and vital liquid in this conflict. It dictates the financial markets, it commands naval fleets, and it starts the wars. But if this new eye-for-an-eye warfare continues its trajectory of deliberately targeting desalination plants, what happens next? What happens when the real existential crisis in the Middle East isn't about how the rest of the world powers its cars, but whether millions of everyday people can physically survive in a desert with absolutely no drinking water?
That is an incredibly chilling thought to leave on, and it completely shifts the perspective on what is truly at stake here. Thank you so much for joining us as we navigated the complexities of this massive global shockwave. Remember to always question the narratives, look at the underlying data, and above all, stay curious. Catch you on the next deep dive.